Hi guys, I've said before, stop listening to politicians and instead listen to experts. It isn't just because they actually know what they're talking about, but unlike politicians, they run the risk of damaging their reputation if they are proven wrong or have unintentionally or intentionally misled investors or the public. First, I want you to listen to the business secretary dismiss claims that Brexit had anything to do with the recent problems facing the car industry in Britain. This is following news that the auto group Stellantis wants the UK government to change the TCA post-Brexit deal. First, let's hear what the Tory Brexiteer had to say. Then David Bailey, Professor of Business Economics at Birmingham Business School.
We have been able to launch the biggest free trade agreement that the UK has seen since we left the European Union and since the TCA. But he also mentions a lot of systemic issues which are being faced globally. He talks about the US IRA and the EU GDP, and he is right to raise these things, but it is good for me to mention that there is a lot that we are doing in this space. For example, the issue that the automotive industries are talking about is around rules of origin. This is something that the EU are also worried about because the costs of the components have risen. This isn't to do with Brexit. This is to do.
David, in simple terms, what's the story here? What's the problem?
So, as part of the trade and cooperation agreement between the UK and the EU, tariffs are avoided as long as local content rules are complied with. So you need a certain amount of content in stuff that's made and traded to qualify. Now, usually that's 55%. There was a special agreement negotiated at the last minute for electric vehicles, recognising that lots of stuff going into electric cars, battery components, raw materials, comes from Asia, including China. So that the local content figure was set much lower, about 40% for the electric vehicle and 30% for batteries. That tightens up, though, from the beginning of next year. It gets much tougher. And from the beginning of 2027, the battery has to be made in the EU or the UK. Now, if car makers can't meet those targets of more local content, they will have to pay tariffs when the car is traded between the UK and the EU. That's the essence of the problem. Car makers can't meet the tight rules that are coming in.
So
none of this would be an issue if the UK was in the single market. See, this is a consequence of the TCA. Now, Kemi Badenoch is saying this has nothing to do with Brexit. This has everything to do with Brexit, because if Brexit didn't happen, we wouldn't be talking about this, because manufacturers in the UK would be able to sell the cars freely into the EU without any of these tariffs or any of these rules of origin. So it's not just the tariffs that's the problem, it's also the bureaucracy around the rules of origin that they have to deal with. None of this would be happening. Like the Northern Ireland Protocol and all of that, none of this would be happening if the UK had remained as a whole in the single market. But that's not what Brexiteers wanted. Brexiteers wanted to be outside the single market. The car industry had been talking about these problems, not specifically these ones about rules of origin and the TCA, but the problems Brexit would create if the UK left the EU. They talked about the single market. They talked about customs. They talked about tariffs. They talked about all of these things. And the response from Brexiteers was, of course, Project Fear. That's all Project Fear. Stop scaremongering. Everything will be fine. You just have to believe in Britain. Once again, we have to go to the experts. The experts are telling the truth here. The politicians are lying. And as I said at the beginning of this, the politicians can lie and get away with it because there are no consequences, no real consequences. Kemi Badenoch will continue to lie and say this has nothing to do with Brexit, and her supporters will take that on board and believe, well, this is nothing to do with Brexit. It's about the EU wanting to punish the UK, or it's about some sort of competition between UK manufacturers and UK manufacturers and European manufacturers. And this is the EU trying to get one over on the UK. A lot of this could have also been avoided if British manufacturing of batteries had actually started. But this was another victim of Brexit, because they also rely on bringing in components from abroad. And of course, investment in the UK has dropped. So it was a huge risk investing in the UK. And this is part of the reason why the battery companies were turned off from investing in Britain. So you don't have a real large-scale manufacturing of batteries taking place, which would have been necessary from 2027, as was pointed out here. So what's going to happen to the industry? Well, what is Rishi Sunak doing at the moment? He's going cap in hand to the EU, asking them to change the rules. Now, some European-based manufacturers also want the rules changed. But here we are once again, Brexit running into reality, and the response from politicians is either nothing to do with Brexit, or the more pragmatic ones like Rishi Sunak begging to the EU to change the rules. Once again, none of these rules would have had any impact whatsoever if the UK had remained in the single market. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think about all of this. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.